Welcome back to the Astrology Report, this time for February 5th through February 11th of 2024. My name is Cam White. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. We have a kind of an interesting week. It's not the craziest, however, things do change as they do every single day. So let's just get started with it. So we're starting the week off with Mercury ingressing into Aquarius. It will then conjoin Pluto as well. The moon will be in Sagittarius squaring Neptune. Now, I would have ended last week talking about Mercury ingressing into Aquarius because technically it ingresses on Sunday, which would be today, the day you're watching this, but it doesn't ingress until really late at night. And Mercury goes into Aquarius and then like 5 minutes later conjoins Pluto, which I find to be that as like a little bit more of an important transit. And of course, Mercury conjoins Pluto really, really late at night, like super early in the morning. With Mercury in Aquarius, it's hard not to think about like Steve Jobs. Now, he has Mercury retrograde, and he has Mercury retrograde in Aquarius as his ascendant ruler, and Apple's whole, like, what do you call that? Your MO, your, what do you call that? I don't remember what you call the thing that companies, like, say, but it's think different. And so I like Mercury in Aquarius for kind of this idea of when it comes to our thoughts, the way that we think. I think Mercury retrograde is a little bit more of a better way of thinking of think different. But Mercury in Aquarius, what Steve Jobs is doing is just thinking differently about technology, thinking different about, the way in which we connect ourselves via technology, how we use technology. And so Mercury in Aquarius is essentially like, what are our thoughts? How do we interact? What is the interface in which we interact with technology, with people, with society, with ideas? And as Mercury goes into Aquarius, we're a little bit more connected to that. While Mercury in Capricorn was a little bit more of like, hey, what's the structure? What's the plan? Mercury in Aquarius is a lot more of like, okay, well, how are we connecting ourselves through like a web? And when I say a web, I mean like both like a spider web kind of a web and, of course, the interwebs. But Mercury conjoins Pluto. Number one, Mercury is essentially like a microphone. Whenever Mercury conjoins a planet, that it's like as if that planet kind of gets like a, soapbox for a second in order to say what it wants to say. And this is Pluto in Aquarius. This is really technically our first transit to Pluto in Aquarius. When Pluto entered Aquarius between March and June of 2023, no planets really conjoined it. I don't even think we got any. I think we had the Mars opposition to Pluto. I can't actually remember if we had oppositions to Pluto or not. Maybe Venus and Leo was opposite Pluto. But anyway, with Mercury conjoining Pluto in Aquarius on more of a geopolitical level, economic level, I think you'll see some kind of like whatever Pluto in Aquarius is, we'll be getting a little bit more information about, whether that's some sort of news article, whether that's some sort of a tech thing. The other way I look at it is, again, on more of a personal level, the feeling of overwhelm, of feeling out of control kind of heightens with Mercury conjoining Pluto. Because, like, again, Pluto is, like corruption and fear, phobia, power, transformation. And, like, when Mercury's conjoining that, it's like, that's all we can think about. And it's kind of like almost spiraling, almost in a sense. So there is a level of it that will feel kind of overwhelming. The other part of it is on Monday, the moon will be in Sagittarius squaring Neptune. So the moon, making a square to Neptune is like, okay, Neptune is illusion, deceit, all of those things, and the moon's squaring it. So there's kind of like this like confusion over what's going on, this confusion over what is happening. And so I think as Mercury conjoins Pluto with the moon squaring, Neptune, it's going to get really easy to get lost in the sauce and lost in the unknown. And this is where it's going to be really important to like ground yourself. Like, yes, we still have a lot of Capricorn transits going on, but the sun's in an air sign, Mercury's in an air sign, moon's in a fire sign. It's very easy to get lost in our thoughts and our passion. And we'll be a little bit all over the place mentally on Monday. And I don't think that's something necessarily to worry about, but just something to catch yourself on. Like, hey, is my mind going over here? Is my mind going over there? What am I worried about? What am I tripping on? And do I need to trip on these type of things? I've talked a lot about on this channel, and I believe by now, my, delineation episode about the Saturn-Neptune conjunctions should be out by now. And when you do like astrology and you look at like the future, it's super easy to get overwhelmed and to panic and to be like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And while that's not necessarily a wrong thing to do, it doesn't necessarily help. And the more that I've gotten into it, like there is a kind of a part of you that gets, scared or nervous or like tinfoil hat, but there's another part of you that's kind of like, well, you see the end of it. Like you can look at a bad transit, know that that's going to be bad, and then see what happens after that, and know that that's probably going to be pretty decent and pretty okay. And so I just look at Mercury conjoining Pluto as number one. There's a lot of like thoughts around, again, like corruption or power related to societies, groups, people, technology. On a more personal level, it just feels very overwhelming. Wherever Pluto's at in your birth chart, whatever house it's ingressing into, Mercury's going to go there. And so it's kind of overwhelmingly thinking about all of the ideas and all of the options and all the things that are happening here. But on a more positive level, I've seen just a lot of Pluto and Aquarius be empowering for a lot of people. It's hard to deny that. You know what I mean? Like, this is what I find so interesting about Pluto's transit as of right now is, yeah, it does roll all these bad things, but just in my work, I'm going to give it like 70-30. Like 70% of people, it's like, man, Pluto shifted. Like, for example, I had a client, it was like Pluto shifted into her fourth house and she finally felt as if she could like set a boundary with her family and her parents. I've seen Pluto shift into just, you know, it really just depends on the context here, but when you see just like Pluto shift into it, yeah, typically you're going to see like these kind of bad things happen, but I'm just seeing a lot of like empowerment right now. And I find that refreshing, to be honest with you guys. And so with Mercury conjoining Pluto, maybe there is that kind of mental connection of like, oh, I do have the power over here. I do have influence over here. I do know how I can navigate this situation, and I don't feel powerless over this situation. Now, again, I would say 30% has been kind of like bad things happening to people. However, you just have to put it and apply it in your life. And I just think Mercury conjoining Pluto is that mental connection to why we have fears over something or realizing that we have power over something. And as the moon squares Neptune, my only issue with this is it is confusing. Like the moon in Sag squaring Neptune is kind of like this lost in the sauce, not having a lot of clarity, head up in the clouds, kind of having a feeling like that. So I feel as if I'm leaning a little bit more towards like chaos and confusion. And not so necessarily like, you know, empowerment, but the moon squaring Neptune, you know, the moon is in Sagittarius squaring Neptune, where it's like, it is okay to be delusional about positivity. Just like people are delusional about how bad things really are or how bad their lives are. It's like, you're allowed to be delusional about, hey, like my life can get instantly better right now. There's literally no harm in having that belief, by the way. Like it's super easy to be like, oh, this happens and we're doomed and life's bad and I'm going to lose everything. Or you could just be delusional of like, everything's going to go my way. Everything works out for me exactly the way that it does. You know what's a hack I learned? And I wonder if this is because I'm a Sag rising with like Jupiter on my ascendant. The affirmation and genuine belief that I am lucky is so like, that is just a hack. Like if you can genuinely believe that you are a lucky person, lucky things will happen to you. And it really is kind of a hack. So I would just kind of recommend with the moon and Sag squaring Neptune is like, don't be afraid to like, if you're going to be delusional about something, like make it like a positive delusion. Cause like there almost isn't a harm in that. Like maybe it'd be like getting your expectations too high. But it's not necessarily like, oh, I'm expecting these things. It's just, that's just the way that they are. Then we get to Tuesday and the moon will ingress into Capricorn. It will first sextile Saturn and then trine Jupiter. I love Tuesday and Wednesday for, again, more of this Capricorn stuff. Like I would really utilize this energy right now because the rest of the year is not as streamlined as this. Like March gets a little confusing and weird. April is kind of a shit show. May is awesome. June is different. June is a big slowdown, but just a big change. And the rest of the year is kind of like slow for the most part. So like with all this Capricorn energy, you know, you're probably sick of me talking about like getting work done and focusing on business and all that stuff. But it's like, that's just what the time is. And you may not also get that time again. You know what I mean? So as the moon goes into Capricorn, emotionally detaching from things, being a little bit more cold, being a little bit more brutal. There's times and places for that. And as the moon goes into Capricorn, sextile Saturn, it's like, cool. You know, it's not the moon in Scorpio that we had last week where we're like emotionally distraught. It's just like, yo, I'm just disconnected. Like, yo, I'm just like I'm not even going to have my emotional investment into this. Moon sextile Saturn, there's a little bit of like that growing up, that feeling like, you know, I almost look at Saturn and Pisces as very like nurturing of like inner child stuff. Like, you know, like iPad kids nowadays, it's like the second they don't have entertainment, they break down. And it's okay to be bored. It's okay to be still. It's okay to not have a distraction. And I feel like so many parents like really need to like work on like not putting the iPad in front of kids or distracting them with entertainment because again, and it's, you know, people are like, well, I just got to entertain my kid. It's just like, yeah, well, you're raising someone who can't deal with, you know, the present moment. And there are very genuine repercussions for those actions. And so, I know I got a lot of parents that follow me, and I'm sure, some of you are going to be like, but I have to, it's the only thing that makes them happy. It's like, well, they're a kid. Like, your job as a parent isn't to coddle them and to entertain them. It's there to like discipline them and teach them and guide them. And I look at a lot of Saturn and Pisces as, again, like I almost look at it as like healing inner child stuff in terms of like, it's okay to be to be unsure, and it's okay to have feelings, but you also have to be the one that's in control of them. You have to be the one that's like, I can be aware of my feelings and, acknowledge them without like making decisions based off of them. So the moon, sextile Saturn, and then of course it trines Jupiter, which again, moon in Capricorn trining Jupiter is like, how do I want to say this? It's like, just knock a little bit, when it comes to like business or whatever, like we all have a billion things to do. I just put this in business because it's like, there's an immediate list I have of things that I have to do today or tomorrow or whatever. And then I have this really, really big list of like, I really need to like change some things on my website. I really have to do this. I really have to do that. And it's this really, really, really long list that like, if I were to try to sit down in a week and do, I wouldn't be able to do. It'd be too much. And so what I like to do is when I have some free time is slowly knock away on the big list items. And I feel like the moon in Capricorn trining Jupiter is like, don't be afraid to knock something off of that list. Like maybe it's just one thing. And of course, your list will ever be expanding and growing of things that you have to do and things that you're responsible for and things that you need to do or things that you want to do. But when you try to take all those on all at once, it's just not going to work. It's like, like for example, like my first and foremost job is doing consultations and posting videos. And of course, there's other things like I really need to get my email more organized. I really need to get my website a little bit better. There's more efficient things I need to do. It's just that like I can't sit down and do that. It's just like I have to kind of knock things off the list one at a time. And I think that's what the moon in Capricorn trining Jupiter is good for, is like, hey, maybe you have some free time. Maybe you could sit down and focus and just being like, what is the small thing I can knock off the list that will take a little bit more of a greater time? Because like I've been saying with Jupiter and Taurus, slow and steady wins the race. You're not going to be able to accomplish everything overnight. We need to like maximize value and focus a little bit more on quality here. And I just think the moon in Capricorn trining Jupiter is an excellent time to, again, get things done, like get good work done. But it's not so much like Speedy Gonzalez, even though Mars is in Capricorn. We'll talk about that as the week goes on. But as far as Tuesday goes, it's like, what's something that might take you a little while that you have some time to knock out? And then we get to Wednesday. On Wednesday, the moon will then conjoin Venus in Capricorn. It will trine Uranus and conjoin Mars. So this is a little bit more of like the momentum's building up. You could take a little bit more action. The moon conjoining Venus is like, it's fun. Like there's, something I really love about anything related to business. And, some of you might be able to get this experience within a corporate job. The parameters are probably a lot more strict, but there's a lot of creativity to be had. In how you solve issues, in how you work through problems, in how you create solutions. And I look at the moon conjoining Venus is that there's something fun about this. Like the moon, and we love the moon and Venus together, but this is the moon's detriment sign. And Venus, Venus has a funny relationship to Capricorn. It's like she's not exalted. I mean, she's in triplicity, like she's in an earth sign, but it's like, again, very Capricorn, Saturnian, business, essentially. It's hard, or like, again, just structure. And I just think as the moon's conjoining Venus is like, you can take the emotions out of it and still be creative. Like, let's say, you're a creative director for a company or a corporation and you don't really like the creative stuff that they're making you do. You could still have fun with the creative process though, and still like allow yourself to express yourself creatively through that. So the moon conjoining Venus is having fun working within the system, being more creative and just enjoying it more. Like there's pleasure here, like abiding by the system, going by the plan. And then of course the moon trines Uranus. That will allow you some sort of opportunity for, again, breakthrough, innovation, trying things differently. And then the moon conjoins Mars. The moon conjoining Mars, like after that trine, the way I almost look at this with moon conjoining Venus, trine Uranus, conjoin Mars is like, you know what? I don't want to do this. Like when I make music, there's times where I'm like, oh, this is really creative and fun. And I'll come up with an idea and I'll be like, oh, that's cool. And I'll come back to it a few days and I'm like, oh gosh, this sounds like shit. But I know if I'm like, look, if I just do the things that I know I need to do to it, even though I don't want to, it'll sound good. So I think of it much more as like a project or like a job. And it's like, my job is to make this sound good. So the moon conjoins Venus. It's like, I take my emotions out of it. There's the things that I have to do to it. and then that's fun. And then I change something about a frequency or like a LFO shape or something like that. And the sound just comes out and live. I'm like, oh, sick. This is the sound I was looking for. I just had to put my brain to it. I had to actually be disciplined about doing it and not just being emotionally exhausted by it, not putting my emotional investment into it. And then the moon conjoins Mars, and it's like it gets you excited to do the rest of it because then you actually created the thing that you wanted to create, even though getting you there was probably the hardest part. So I look at the moon conjoining Mars is after that trine to Uranus is like, if you just sit down, take your emotions out of it, like exercise the plan that you need to, you might find some sort of innovative way of doing things that then motivate you to do more and to finish that project and to complete that task. Venus also trines Uranus on Wednesday when the moon conjoins it. And if Venus is trining Uranus, again, that is just, in my opinion, adding more to that creative inspiration. Venus in Capricorn is like, for example, like with a lot of music stuff, there's things that like I want to do, but I know like, for example, everything has to be in the right key. That includes the kicks, the snares, the bass line. And I really like, I'm a drummer. I struggle with like, sometimes like, okay, what the fuck are the keys? And the circle of fifths and all that kind of good stuff. But I know if I just like, and I get overwhelmed because I have like my issue is when I don't know something, I give up. And so I get really hungry to know things, but when it feels overwhelming, like music production, like if you've ever downloaded FL Studio and just sat blankly and looked at it and be like, I don't even know what to do here, and you just gave up, hit the like button because I've been there. But for me, it was like, let me take my emotions out of it because I really want to do this more than I want to, feel competent. And so like I have to Google things and learn things, and it's frustrating and it's annoying and it's overwhelming, and I feel stupid, and then I feel shame, and then that brings back all my stupid beliefs from childhood where I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm never going to succeed, and we go through that whole cycle. And rather than going through that whole cycle, you just come back, just Google it and just be a beginner. It's okay to not know how to do something. It's okay to not be perfect at whatever you're trying to do the first time or the second time or the 20th or the 30th time. Like we're all learning at whatever capacity that we are. I mean, I have almost like, I think of like 700 YouTube videos. I almost got 1,000 YouTube videos. I've been doing this for 7 years. I'm still learning better ways to record videos, to be a better speaker. Like it's just a part of the process. But I think with Venus and Capricorn, there's some funness to it. There's some enjoyment to, like, again, doing the structure, doing how things are supposed to. Like, for example, this might not make a lot of sense to you guys, but for the music producers, you will. I commit an ultimate sin when I make music, and that is I start every project with a limiter on the master. What essentially that means is, for people that don't know anything about music production, is like it'd be like I'm painting the house. I'm painting my house without a primer. That's essentially what I'm doing. And it's the ultimate sin. What you're supposed to do is take off the limiter on the master and then go from there. But I don't mix and master my sounds. I have an engineer for that because I'm not good at those things. But Venus trining Uranus is so like, well, like the reason I even brought that up as an analogy is I have learned better, and there's certain things that I like just want to go ahead and start making music. But I know if I just follow these plans and these systems, that the sound will be better and I don't have to work backwards. Like if you ever painted a house, like all these walls are tan here, which they look good, but gosh, this place would look so much better with white walls. It'd be so much brighter in here. I'm such an interior design nerd. But Venus trining Uranus is like, if you allow yourself to follow these plans and the structures that other people have followed, like I'm very rebellious. I just make music. Like this is why I like FL Studio, is like, essentially most music production DAWs are like very linear, and FL Studio is like a canvas. Like you can make it as messy and as crappy as you want, and it'll still play the song. That's why I like FL. But there's certain times where I'm like, okay, let me actually enjoy the process of doing what other producers do in order for things to work the way that I want them to work, even if I have this resistance to it. And Venus trining Uranus is like, sometimes when you do those things, like again, when you discipline yourself in the right way to do things, rather than being like, no, I don't want to do it, I want to do it my way. That allows for a creative breakthrough with how you do that. Like, it's like, there's been so many times I can't even think of it where let's just say for music production, I was like, oh, I learned a more structured way to do it and how everyone else does it rather than me just winging it on my own. And when I figured that out, it unlocked, it was like, oh, that means I can do this. That means I can do that. That means this is why this song sounded weird in this way. And it just allows for so much more of, again, like creativity. So with Venus trining Uranus, I'm ranting here on the same thing, but Venus trining Uranus is like, just follow a system, follow a plan, trust that process and enjoy it along the way, be a beginner. You will have some sort of an innovative breakthrough on how you handle that sort of thing. Like you will be like, oh, I get why people follow this system. But then the other thing we have on Wednesday is Mars sextiles Neptune. So when the moon is conjoining Mars and of course sextiling Neptune with Mars sextiling Neptune, this is where it's, again, there's a lot of creative freedom here, a lot of visionary stuff. Like Uranus is more of a breakthrough, trining Venus in creativity. Mars in Capricorn is like our ability and to be efficient and get things done. Sextiling Neptune is like we kind of get in that groove where like we're creative channeling essentially. Like if you're a creative at all, which 90% of you are, it's just whether or not you do it as a profession or not, but we're all creative at some capacity and we should be expressing that part of ourselves. Like, for me, for a long time, it was dirt bike riding. Like there's something about action sports, like skateboarding and BMX and dirt bike riding that, they get so thrown to the wayside, and it's so sad because it's such a beautiful form of self-expression. It really is. Like I'm really into freestyle motocross and how, it's like gymnastics times 11. Like you're flipping a 250-pound dirt bike 2 times in the air while doing like gymnastic level, body movements. And it's just such a cool way of self-expression. That is even a form of creativity, in my opinion. And I think as Mars is in Capricorn, we have these systems and we have these plans of being efficient, and we're in that channeling mode of channeling that creativity. Mars sextiling Neptune is just turning that up a little bit more of like, when you're really in the zone and you're getting really creative and it's just coming out of you, it's just pouring out of you, and you are just being a vessel for whatever God is sending down to you, and you are not in the way of it. Like that's how I look at really Wednesday, is like you are just channeling what God is sending you through, and you are not in the way, and you can create some really beautiful things. And maybe just for you, it's just getting some work done, or maybe for you, it's just connecting with your child, or, for people like me, it's very creative stuff. There's a lot of just like channeling here. Like I really like it. So then we get to Thursday, and on Thursday, the moon is going to ingress into Aquarius. It will then conjoin Pluto. It will then conjoin Mercury and square Jupiter. So Thursday, the moon, we kind of get more locked into this Aquarius stuff. And as the moon conjoins Pluto, to kind of continue with that music analogy, it almost reminds me of like not sharing music. Like I broke a golden rule. You're not supposed to talk about what you're doing before you actually do it. But just for me, I struggled to make these videos if I can't relate things to my own personal life. You know what I mean? And I've gotten a lot of good feedback of like, I appreciate you sharing your story about music. And I'm like, trust me, because there's a part of me that doesn't want to talk about what I'm doing. I want to keep it. We're doing big things. We're moving in silence. I want to be like that. But, a part of my job is also like sharing what I'm going through. And I would rather just kind of be honest and like, again, not flop, which thank you for not letting me flop. Check out Charmer, or that's the next song. You weren't supposed to know that. Captured. Check out Captured. That's funny given what I just said. The moon goes into Aquarius, right? Our emotions are a lot more connected to the people around us, society, technology. How does everyone feel about things? And the moon conjoins Pluto, where again, that kind of corrupted, kind of like, overwhelmed, that, powerful feeling. Again, moon conjoining Pluto is either going to be like, man, I feel really good about the people I've surrounded myself by, or the moon conjoining Pluto is like, I'm scared about the people I've surrounded myself by, so I'm just going to go with the crowd, even though I might think I have like nuances. Again, this is what I love about the Leo Aquarius axis, is like, you need a strong leader to mobilize any sort of group or any sort of community. And number 2, every individual has a complete different, unique opinion on so many different things, even if you can categorize them within a group. Like you don't get Aquarius without Leo. This is what's fun about the whole thinking about axis things. But the moon conjoining Pluto can be feeling overwhelmed of like, well, this is how everyone thinks, and this is how everyone's kind of doing things. And, I feel limited by that. But the other part of it is like, who do you have around you that does empower you, that does make you feel like you can be comfortable with your voice? Like, this is why I'm so happy. I talked about this last week. Like, I've had to say things that, I'd rather be authentic than scared of my following. And I've done that. And I've lost a lot of followers because of that. But I've also cultivated an audience in which, like, I feel so safe and comfortable with you guys being able to say things. And I know not every one of you agrees with everything I say, and you really shouldn't. But the fact that you guys respect me for being able to be open and say my mind is like, it is an empowered feeling. Like, I feel like proud of my audience. I feel confident with you guys. There's so much more like love I send you guys because of that. Like, you really have no idea. It really is kind of a big deal for me. So the moon conjoining Pluto is kind of that. But then the moon conjoins Mercury, Where now there's a little bit more of an expression of an emotion. Now there's a little bit more of a communication of an emotion. Let's share our feelings. Let's share our ideas of how we connect with people. Like if the moon, I mean, the moon is essentially a connector as well. The moon is a lot of different things in astrology. You'll kind of learn that. The moon is kind of this, it's almost mercurial in nature. Like the more you learn about astrology, the more you understand the moon is kind of like a day by day sort of a thing. But the moon conjoining Mercury is definitely like expressing emotions, sharing our emotions. And again, in Aquarius, like again, what is the technology that we use? How do we integrate ourselves in society? What does it mean for our wider, community, if that makes sense? And so I look at the moon conjoining Pluto as kind of a fear around things or an empowerment feeling about things, and then a need to express that. But the moon then squares Jupiter. So the issue with the moon squaring Jupiter is, as the moon squares Jupiter, the crowd, the group around things may have a disagreement on something that is not aligned with Jupiter and Taurus. Like, for example, Jupiter and Taurus is like, here's a good way of looking at things. Putting your money in the S&P, letting it go up and go down as the years go by, it's probably going to make you better returns than trying to find the right stock to dump money in and make riches overnight. And the moon in Aquarius squaring Jupiter and Taurus is kind of like, they might want things to either be faster or do things differently that don't necessarily agree with the long-term plan, with the long-term increase in value. And that might be because of speed, that might be because of efficiency, that might be because of the idealism around it. But the moon in Aquarius squaring Jupiter and Taurus is like, if you're listening to feedback from other people, if you are connected more with other people, that emotional connection that you have with a wider range of audience, they're not going to see the vision. And there might be a time where you have to, again, maybe lean a little bit more into that. We are getting ready for a new moon in Aquarius, but there also might be times where you have to kind of like say like, hey, that might be the wrong move, because look, Jupiter and Taurus, if we just invest our money into the S&P, and we don't think about it, we'll probably end up making a better return than everything else. And I don't trade. I need to trade. I've lost out on so much money. And so I'm sure I got some investor people cringing at what I say, but I'm just using this as kind of an analogy. And I just think as the moon's in Aquarius squaring Jupiter and Taurus is our emotional connection to people is going to, not disrupt, but not be in agreement with long-term value, long-term sustainability. And so then we get to Friday and we have the new moon in Aquarius. Now this new moon, you can argue is squaring Uranus. It's off by a degree. I kind of go back and forth with this one. We'll just say it's squaring Uranus for, to be a little bit more safe. I mean, I've said this before, but I feel like anything in Aquarius squaring Uranus is if you've seen Hot Rod, I've made this analogy before, so forgive me if I'm just repeating myself and you're annoyed of it. But in Hot Rod, which is one of the best movies ever, they're banding together. They're going to go do this big thing. It's this beautiful thing. The community all surrounds them and they start singing and they're kind of like, why is everyone singing with us and walking with us? This is weird. And then some guy out of nowhere brings a trash can and breaks a window and then a riot starts out. It's community and groups can be a very great thing until the CIA gets involved and, they create a narrative around why these are the bad people. That's one way of looking at it. But there's some sort of, again, major disruption related to groups, communities, ideas, thoughts, technology, and society. And it's Uranus and Taurus. Uranus it almost reminds me of kind of the climate protesters that kind of disrupt, this would be they don't really disrupt much besides traffic. But Uranus and Taurus is disruption and shakeups related to value, material wealth. It reminds me a lot of the whole AMC GameStop thing in 2021, where all those Reddit, Wall Street bets people. I forgot. I don't know. There was some short squeeze. These are all terms I don't really know what they mean. I just know the words. But they pretty much took a bunch of money from rich people, and that's very Aquarius energy squaring Uranus of let's disrupt the system. Let's disrupt value. It almost makes me think of again, if, I can't think of a better analogy than that. There's some sort of, and again, this is the new moon. We're getting into this reset. We're getting into this, lower energy time where we're really focused on, again, What are the ideas that we're connected to in terms of society and other people? I feel like that's more important now than ever with Pluto here and just the world climate around anything political and even economical. Um, there's kind of this more of a connecting with our tribe, connecting with our people. Maybe that's your family, maybe that's your friends, maybe that's, colleagues in your workspace, but it's squaring Uranus. So this is a little disruptive. This is a little bit problematic. This is a little bit not foreseen. I wouldn't even argue that it's bad. It's just disruptive, if that makes sense. Like maybe, for example, the reason you and your colleagues get together that you haven't spoken to for a long time is because something happened within your niche world and you're like, I need to talk to someone about this. And then you guys all share it. It's like maybe a disruptive thing happens that connects you more with other people. But that's kind of the thing going on with the new moon in Aquarius squaring Uranus is like, again, disruption related to, either groups of people or, this disruption brings you closer to people or this close group of people cause disruption. Then we get to Saturday. The moon will ingress into Pisces. It will conjoin Saturn and sextile Jupiter. So what I like about the moon in Pisces is a little bit more like the moon in Pisces is so all over the place. Like it's very dreamy. For my Gen Zers out there, you've seen this show Flapjack. Flapjack is such a Pisces. It's so incredible. And if you've never seen the show Flapjack, if you really want to take your time out and watch it, then go ahead. But like the main character Flapjack is like literally the essence of everything in Pisces. The moon going into Pisces is just very, again, emotional, sensitive. And these aren't bad words. I know like I can demonize them sometimes. Like emotional is a good word to have. It's just, again, what do you do with those emotions? And emotional can mean empathy. It can mean sympathy. It can mean excitement. It can mean passion. And it is very sensitive to like, again, what its surroundings are. Like you get a moon and Pisces person to see like any sad video about like a cat and they're going to cry. And again, that's not necessarily a bad quality to have. Like it's something I try to tell people in like my consultations. It's like, you might have a quote unquote bad placement. That doesn't mean inherently anything bad. It just means there's something that you do from time to time that can be bad, but this is also something good for you. Like for example, when I see people who have like, let's say Taurus rising with Venus and Scorpio in the 7th, what is bad about that is you all hang on to people you really shouldn't a lot of the time. But what's such a great quality about that is like, you're fucking loyal. I've also seen areas where it's like Venus and Scorpio is like doing toxic things with it regarding relationships. And again, that manifests in so many different ways. But with like Venus and Scorpio, it's so much like I'm going to hold on to something. I'm not going to let go. There's this kind of like deep level of commitment that, those kind of people can have. And so when you see like a bad placement, you have to understand where that bad thing comes up and why that bad thing is the way that it is. But you have to understand that that is also a virtue. That is also something, a good quality that you inherently have. And you just got to be able to recognize the difference of when you use that quality for good versus when that quality is fucking you up. But as the moon is in Pisces conjoining Saturn, there's again a little bit more of emotional maturity here, a little bit more of like, hey, something I really appreciate about, the year of the Lord 2024, and a lot of this is 2023, is so many people like in 2020 and in 2021, it was like black and white. You're either on this side and you see things this way, or you're on this side and you see things that way. And I feel as if so many more people have a nuanced opinion about things of like, well, it's more complicated than that. And it's like, because it is. And I like the moon in Pisces conjoining Saturn is like, well, I can see all sides of the things. I could see truths in both sides and I could see falsehoods in both sides. And there's a little bit more of like an emotional discipline without being, what's the word where someone just gets like excitable, if that makes sense. And as the moon conjoins Saturn, in Pisces, we're a little bit more like in control of our emotions, more disciplined, and having boundaries to what we're sensitive to. Like, for example, I'm sensitive to, I've talked shit on like the fentanyl addicts and the homelesses out here, but I was talking to my mom about this. Like, it was like -9, -10, like maybe a couple weeks ago here. It's like, when I see the homeless people, I'm like, I my heart does break for that. Like, that's genuinely, like, they could die. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's, yes, do I not enjoy them screaming and yelling at people and harassing people and being high and, genuinely making society worse? No, I hate that. But I also hate seeing them like possibly freeze to death. Like, that's very sad. However, I'm not at a space where I can do much about it. Like I can't, build a structure for them or get them sober and get them help. I can't give to every single person that I interact with because it's every single day. It's just $5 here, $10 here, doing that. I can't do that. And so, and also too, if I'm so emotionally distraught over the things that I'm seeing, then I'm letting things outside of my control emotionally manipulate me. And then I'm emotionally drained by the end of the day. And so like the moon in Pisces conjoining Saturn is just kind of like, you can recognize an issue while still having a boundary around that. And I think that's a really important muscle to flex. This is why I've been kind of saying, like, especially with the whole Israel Palestine thing, is like, it's genuinely really bad what's going on there. And like you should feel that in some sort of capacity, but I feel as if on both sides there's this lack of like an emotional boundary on that, like knowing like the protest around Starbucks isn't going to stop Lockheed Martin from, selling bombs to Israel. It's not going to stop, Raytheon from doing any of those things. And while there might be significant meaning in doing those things, it's not going to actually move the needle in any significant way. And the other reason I have this is, as the years go on, we will see more and more war. And if this is so emotionally distraught to you, like, it's going to be a tough time. Like, having more emotional discipline and like boundaries with our empathy is important, because like, if like, again, as time goes on, you will have more and more things that will emotionally excite you. And I say excite as in like trigger you. And it's going to be important to have, like, for example, if you're on Instagram Reels, I've said this before, Instagram has become what Twitter was in like 2010. It's like, I see the worst things, but there's always comments of like, there's like videos of like car crashes or like something bad happening or two people getting into a fight. And you'll hear like a woman scream, like in terror, like, ah! And all the comments are like, look, another woman screaming about shit and it's not helping anything. It's like, as funny as they are, maybe misogynistic, there's a truth to, like, when you are in a critical situation, your emotional discipline is the most important thing that you could possibly have. And it's important to exercise that muscle when you need it. If you are in a situation in which like there's chaos happening around you and you're so caught up in it that you're so emotional that you're screaming, it doesn't help anything. Like, you have to be like, for example, like, if you're in a car crash and, the person next to you is injured, if you're screaming, oh my God, you're panicking. Like, and let's say you have a wound, you're going to bleed more. Versus if you say, oh my God, I'm bleeding. Like, I need to stop the bleed. Is the person next to me fine? Like, how do I put a tourniquet on them? This is why, it's not that I say this stuff about the Israel-Palestine thing as if I don't have empathy for that, but it's like, this is not like, again, this is almost kind of like a test for how things are going to go on in the future. Because like, at some point, America is going to be bombing more countries, or we're going to get bombed. And then how do we have that emotional discipline? We don't want to be reactionary. It's the same thing with 9/11. 9/11 happened. Don't get me wrong. That was a really bad thing. But then what did we allow that to happen? We absolutely completely destroyed the Middle East. And we didn't really question it for a while, for a long time. And now most people, even a lot of right-wing people, are like, maybe the Iraq war was bad. Why did we go to Iraq? But it was because they manipulated our emotions on stuff like that. So I'm just ranting here, but I just look at the moon conjoining Saturn as like, having emotional discipline and having emotional boundaries is so, so important for so many aspects of our lives. And I think that is a big thing we have to deal with Saturn and Pisces. And I can't emphasize that enough. And I think as the moon sextiles Jupiter, right after that, there's a little bit of like, hey, like, yes, this, like, I have to have this kind of boundary around my sensitivity. But then the moon sextiles Jupiter, where there's like, okay, like, I have exercised this muscle and I could see the benefits of it now. Like, Jupiter's like, I do have hope that things will be better. I do have hope and I do have gratitude for what I have. And I could see the positive side of things. Now, the big two things that we have happening on Saturday is going to be Mercury making a square to Jupiter and Mars being at its exalted degree. So, really weird day on Saturday. I can't believe I'm 39 minutes into this. I'm just ranting here, I guess. Mercury in Aquarius squaring Jupiter is Mercury is rationale and Jupiter is hope and belief and faith. And I have quoted Rhetorius so many times. I can't, like, I'm sure you guys are sick of it, but like Mercury and Jupiter are like opposite things. Mercury is rationality and scarcity, and Jupiter is like abundance and fortune. Like, abundance is diametrically opposed to things being scarce. When I see Mercury in Aquarius squaring Jupiter and Taurus, is like Mercury is in Aquarius is like, it's very like, oh, there's too much carbon in the air, so you can only eat 6 ounces of meat a month, and you've got to replace your protein with bugs. But Jupiter and Taurus is kind of saying like, there's plenty of meat to go around. There's plenty of ways to do, like, it's still surprising to see so many people talk about meat causing carbon emissions when it's literally like, for one, carbon's good. I know that's a controversial statement, but it is. But the other part of it too is you could eat, like, I think there's good criticisms of factory farming, but also a lot of farmers, because the market's pushing in this way, are getting into regenerative agriculture. And there is a way to raise cattle, raise good, healthy beef, while also replenishing and giving life to the soil. And I just look at Mercury squaring, and I'm using this as an analogy to Mercury squaring Jupiter. It's like Mercury in Aquarius is like, but we need this kind of social control. You need your digital ID. We need all this kind of good stuff. It's the same thing with like why they're letting the immigrants over the border. They want you to digital ID. They want to live in a surveillance state. And then there's other issues too. But Mercury is like, there's this rationale, there's this scarcity, there's this like, well, we have limited resources, so we have to learn how to, manage them in every way. And Jupiter and Taurus is like, there's unlimited resources. Like, there is no such thing as scarcity. There is only abundance. And I think on Saturday, there's this kind of like moment where you're kind of going like, wait, the way I'm thinking is actually not in line with what I know to be true. And I don't find this to be an easy thing to work through. Like, this seems like a genuine like cognitive dissonance level of awareness of like, oh, why am I thinking this way if I'm wanting to believe more of this? If I want to believe that anything's possible for me, if I want to believe that there is abundance in the universe and that I can be taken care of and I can have all of my needs met, why am I thinking in this very cold, calculated, scarce way? And I don't necessarily think it's for like on Saturday to be like, oh, it's because of X, Y, and Z, and you'll figure it out. It's more of like, I think Saturday is a really good day to check in and be like, why do I think that way? What about me triggers me to think this way? And what can I do possibly to see a different way of thinking things differently? So again, this week's about thinking things differently, or think differently. But Saturday, we also have Mars at the exalted degree. We're working. We're putting in that, like Mars is, so each planet is exalted in a zodiac sign, but has a very specific degree that it's exalted in. Mars is exalted at 28 degrees Capricorn. So there's just this level of like, again, crushing the system, crushing the plan, crushing your goals that is available to you on Saturday. And then we get to Sunday as the moon's in Pisces, it'll sextile Uranus, it'll sextile Venus, and then it'll conjoin Neptune. So as it sextiles Uranus, this moon in Pisces, I feel like with the moon in Pisces sextiling Uranus, it's like, okay, like, you're emotionally exploring things here and there. You're a little bit loosey-goosey. And then all of a sudden, that helps you kind of, again, figure out a new way of doing things. Then the moon sextiles Venus, where I just feel like the moon in Pisces is like, I'm not a baker or like a cook in any way, but I'm sure there's been cooks or bakers that have just kind of been like, what if I just, like, they've never thought about this before. They're like, what if I just threw some chamomile in here? Or what if I just threw another drop of vanilla? What happens there? And it changes the texture or the flavor profile of whatever you're making, and it makes it a lot better. Like, that's kind of moon sextile Uranus sextiling Venus is like, let me just kind of whimsically do this, or whoops, I put too much cinnamon in it, but it actually made it a lot better. And then the moon conjoins Neptune, where by the end of Sunday, where again, being a little bit lost in the clouds, being a little bit idealistic, being a little bit rose-colored glasses, which can all be good things. It's just, again, what are you applying that to? Like, if there's a positive outlook, again, like the moon conjoining Neptune is like, you should be delusional about, again, what your goals and dreams and ambitions are. But the goal is like, whatever point B you want to get to, you need to think about what that makes you feel like and bring that feeling there. But if like the moon conjoining Neptune is, again, like just being a little bit too lost in the sauce and not wanting to face reality. So, getting fucked up on drugs or getting fucked up on alcohol as a form of escapism. Like, you don't want to do that with the moon conjoining Neptune. And that's how we end the week. We start next week off with Mars ingressing into Aquarius. We have Mars conjoining Pluto. We have Venus sextiling Neptune. We have Venus going into Aquarius, Venus conjoining Pluto. Next week's a big week. Big week, especially in the world. We will definitely see something with the Mars conjoining Pluto thing. So we'll talk about it then. With that being said, I love and appreciate you guys, and I'll be seeing you next week.